What's up YouTube, welcome back to another episode of the Boss Recap, where we rate boss battles in our favorite video games. I'm your host DMLX, and today we'll be webbing up baddies throughout the streets of Manhattan, pre-Scott Stall's facelift, in Marvel's Spider-Man, a PlayStation exclusive action-adventure game based on arguably Marvel Comics' most popular superhero, developed by Insomniac, best known for the Ratchet & Clank series and the Resistance trilogy, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is now being marketed as PlayStation Studios. Marvel's Spider-Man for PS4 was released on September 7th, 2018, with the three-part expansion The City That Never Sleeps released monthly throughout the rest of the same year. Inspired by the long-running comic book mythology and various other adaptations of the wall crawler, the story of Marvel's Spider-Man puts players in the web of a seasoned Peter Parker who's 8 years into his crime-fighting career, but continues to struggle with balancing his superhero and personal responsibilities. And as new and old villains emerge, Spider-Man must overcome both his emotional and physical struggles to save the city and the ones he loves. Upon the game's initial release, Marvel's Spider-Man was met with universal praise from both fans and critics alike, with many even going so far as to claim that Marvel's Spider-Man is the best superhero game of all time. Certainly one of the most successful, seeing that the game sold 3.3 million copies in its first 3 days of release, making Spider-Man the fastest selling first-party video game release in Sony's history. Insomniac's adaptation of the Wet Slinger has some of the best content a superhero game could offer when it comes down to the game's gripping narrative, addictive combat, stunning visuals, creative level design, large pool of villains to fight, cool costumes to wear, and its explorable open world rich with detail. Sure, there are some repetitive side missions and uneventful minigames here and there.
This is what? This is boring.
But overall, Spider-Man for PS4 is a game I highly recommend for those that are fans and newcomers of the friendly neighborhood web slinger. So, how rough was it for Spider-Man to web up his rogues gallery causing havoc across New York? Well, let's find out and recap the bosses. Now, the way bosses are set up in Marvel's Spider-Man varies from mission to mission. Most encounters will be simple one-on-one fights, aside from a few two-on-one engagements, occasionally complemented with a bit of cinematic flair in the form of QuickTime events. Other times you'll be fighting bosses assisted by their henchmen as cannon fodder, as well as a nice way for Spider-Man to build up his focus meter to perform takedowns. No health bars are displayed for any boss, rather players will perform a certain amount of combos / sequence of events when fighting each boss. Also, as a note, I will not be counting the chase missions as bosses for the boss recap, as those encounters play more like obstacle courses than actual fights. Sorry, Screwball fans. The first boss to kick off Spidey's adventure is the Kingpin.
Writing your memoirs? Don't forget the hyphen between spider and man.
Get the chopper ready. I won't be long.
Formerly known as Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin is the biggest crime boss in New York City and Spider-Man's greatest nemesis in the Insomniac universe. For 8 years, Spider-Man has been trying to get Fisk into the slammer, and at the start of the game, Spider-Man will be able to do just that, with the assistance of the NYPD during the raid on Fisk's tower. As a boss, Kingpin is an imposing figure. He's strong, resilient, and resourceful, using hidden turrets to get the jump on Spider-Man upon entering his office, and though not superhuman, Fisk's massive frame is mostly composed of muscle rather than fat, granting him strength and far higher durability than the average human, allowing him to be strong enough to break stone, throw heavy objects, cave in steel pipes, and bust through brick walls.
You are everything that's wrong with this city!
But even though he has the strength of a bull, he'll still call in for backup when he needs it. Delivering severe concussions in the form of high-pressure air blasts is Herman Schultz, aka Shocker. Shocker wears a full-body battlesuit that is equipped with a vibro shock units that are used to send out shockwaves that works efficiently as deadly projectiles and a protective shield. The webslinger catches Shocker in the act of robbing a bank, which then leads to a fight in the main lobby. A bit of an awkward encounter to deal with, seeing that fighting in a compact space made it tough for Spider-Man to traverse within the bank and dodge Shocker's concussive blasts. Taking the form of yin and yang to the fullest extent, we have our first encounter with Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative.
What are you doing to me? Giving you a new perspective.
Marketed as the main villain of the game, Mr. Negative can generate and control what is dubbed as negative energy, mainly used to project powerful energy blasts from his hands or to charge up swords, combining his dark powers with his swordsmanship skills in battle, as well as share his power with his fellow inner demon followers. Mr. Negative also has the ability to corrupt people, basically mind control, or give himself even greater power through amplifying his victims' negative emotions. While trying to stop Mr. Negative from abducting Dr. Morgan Michaels and obtaining the biochemical weapon known as Devil's Breath, Spider-Man officially meets his new foe via speed chase through the city streets, which then leads to Mr. Negative using his corrupt technique on Spider-Man, transporting him into a negative-like zone in order to take control of his mind. During this battle for the mind, Spidey is mainly tasked with fighting off zombie-like projections of the inner demons, counter-striking Mr. Negative's sword slash attacks, and destroying his giant kabuki mask.
The shadows are sworn to me, and I will give them strength. What?
Jumping ahead to the events of Grand Central Station, after Mary Jane and Spider-Man save hostages from a bomb with Devil's Breath, orchestrated by the inner demons, round 2 between Spider-Man and Mr. Negative commences.
Finally.
Sorry I'm late. It's kind of my thing.
The fight takes place in multiple train cars moving through the New York subway tunnels and plays like an action scene straight out of a blockbuster film.
Why are you doing this?
Paying off an old debt.
With the over-the-shoulder camera precision closer towards Spider-Man, making the action feel all the more intense while having to dodge and counter Mr. Negative's surge of attacks, especially during the sequence when Spider-Man has to jump from wall to wall to avoid Lee's negative energy blasts. In the end, Lee is defeated and sent to a nearby maximum security prison known as the Raft, with Devil's Breath secured by the authorities. However, this victory is short-lived due to a prison break that happens at the Raft days later, where Spider-Man learns that some of his greatest enemies, Lee, Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion, have escaped, led by Spider-Man's former mentor, Dr. Octavius, now turned into Dr. Octopus, forming Insomniac's version of the Sinister Six, and warns the beaten Spider-Man not to interfere with their plans. Being Spider-Man, the web-slinger doesn't back down from Doc Ock's warning and decides to round up the villains in the city one by one, starting with an electrifying aerial showdown against Electro and Vulture. Dragged over to the Oscorp power plants, Spider-Man must take down his first supervillains he fought early on in his crime-fighting career simultaneously. Both Electro and Vulture are heavily reliant on using projectile attacks that are fairly simple to counter. For example, when redirecting Vulture's wing blades and dodging his charge attack.
Our long feud ends tonight, insect!
Phew! Thought we had a healthy give and take! Man, have I misread this relationship!
As well as webbing up Electro to perform a string of combos when evading his electrical blasts, and destroying the generators that Electro uses to gain more power.
One down, one to go.
Next up, we have the battle of the Arachnids between Spider-Man and Scorpion.
Damn it! What did he inject me with?
These nuts. Ha! Got him! Ha!
After escaping the raft with the rest of the Sinister Six, Scorpion lures Spider-Man into a trap under the charade of preparing to poison the city's water supply. When Spider-Man arrives, Scorpion is able to get the drop on him for some reason. I guess Spider-Sense only works when the plot demands it. Anyway, Scorpion injects the poison into Spider-Man with his stinger, causing him to have vivid hallucinations, which leads to the most psychedelic moment in the entire game. That includes a scuffle with multiple Scorpions that are fairly easy to take out by webbing them down and supplying a few punches to the stinger, though the real Scorpion is still on the loose after Spider-Man cures himself of the poison.
I think I did it. Where'd my suit go? I think I took decontamination a little too far.
Moments later, over by the docks, Spider-Man sells for another 2-for-1 special with a fight against Rhino and Scorpion.
Oh, Scorps, love you, but you do know it's rude to cut in, right?
What were you gonna do if I didn't show up? Beg him to give up? Yes, Gus, that is exactly what I would have done.
A surprisingly challenging pair to deal with, seeing that this encounter delivers on providing constant pressure by having Rhino charge at Spider-Man non-stop, while Scorpion shoots poisonous projectiles from afar, as well as having to multitask and exposing both villains' weaknesses, such as stunning Rhino by baiting him into large objects, and webbing up Scorpion for an easy combo like during the hallucination fight. However, though their hate for Spider-Man is strong, the duo's ultimate downfall was their lack of team chemistry.
Do you know what Octavius will do if he finds out you failed?
A little force together time might help you boys learn to play nice.
Deep within one of the laboratories owned by Oscorp, where Norman Osborn is being held hostage, Spider-Man must confront Mr. Negative one last time.
I told you I'm sorry. It was an accident. I was trying to help.
You don't help people. You use them.
Before Barton Lee can exact his revenge on Norman Osborn for the death of his parents and turning him into the monster that is Mr. Negative, Spider-Man intervenes, thus leads to a confrontation where Lee showcases his full power, generating a large holographic demonic entity that looks like the Susanoo from Naruto. And on top of that, Spider-Man must once again fight off Lee's zombie-like projections, while evading Lee's flurry of attacks in his demon form. This fight was a true spectacle and made me respect Mr. Negative as a villain even more so. Rounding out the last of the Sinister Six is Doc Ock.
Such a disappointment. Parker.
After defeating Lee and being brutalized by Doc Ock, who escapes with the Devil's Breath antidote and kidnaps Osborn, Spider-Man regroups, then builds himself a sleek new armored suit made from the same material as Doc Ock's mechanical arms. Moments later, Spidey confronts Octavius atop of Oscorp Tower to rescue Osborn and retrieve the antidote to save those who are infected. As a boss fight, this encounter delivers on bringing the right level of fun, drama, and intensity, being that it is the final boss of the main campaign. Doc Ock is relentless as a foe, especially when trying to use his mechanical arms to crush Spider-Man and material of Oscorp Tower as projectiles. Also, the part of the fight where Doc Ock sets the top of Oscorp's tower ablaze was a sight to behold while swinging around the heated platform dodging incoming debris. Not to mention the climactic end with Spider-Man and Doc Ock fighting on the side of Oscorp. Talk about a visual delight. With the emotional weight of it all from beginning to end solidifying this game as one of the best adaptations of Spider-Man in any medium to date.
Peter, where are you going? Peter?
Running a bike gang in Harlem and doing a little drug trafficking on the side, we have Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone.
The angry drug lord drank alone. There's a poem in there somewhere.
You know better than me.
As a boss for one of the side missions in the game, Tombstone possesses superhuman strength, able to lift heavy objects with ease, and seems to have impenetrable skin, as seen capable of taking a gunshot to the head, thanks to being exposed to unknown chemicals in his youth.
Such a disappointment.
However, before confronting the large albino, Spider-Man was able to develop a counter-drug to null Tombstone's vulnerability. In-game, Tombstone plays like one would expect, a brute enemy type that takes a lot more punishment, that calls in the rest of his gang for backup. He also seems to be a fan of Ghost Rider, seeing that halfway through the fight after being exposed to the counter-drug, he'll start using a torch chain as a melee weapon.
Someday, Lonnie, I want to find you doing good. Running a soup kitchen or something.
Soon as soup pays, I'm in.
Studying Spider-Man down to his web shooters is the infamous mercenary Taskmaster. Hired by a secret organization to monitor and possibly recruit Spider-Man, Taskmaster sets up a series of challenges for Spider-Man to tackle throughout New York City, and after completing these challenges, Taskmaster puts Spidey's skills to the test in one-on-one combat. Now what's interesting about Taskmaster is that he has the ability to mimic the physical movements of others, making him a tricky foe to deal with if one does not have superhuman/godlike abilities at their disposal. Players will encounter Taskmaster twice while completing all 16 of his challenges. Honestly, the best form of engagement is to just keep throwing various objects at Taskmaster, which leaves him stunned and open for a string of combos, as he doesn't seem to have an answer for incoming debris.
Why are you stalking me?
An organization hired me to see if you're worth recruiting.
I'd rather be Jonah Jameson's foot masseur than work for anyone who'd hire you.
Your loss. They pay 6 figures. Guess some people just deserve to be poor.
Moving on, the remaining bosses are within the City That Never Sleeps expansion, specifically in episodes Turf Wars and Silver Lining. As mentioned previously, Black Cat will not count as a boss because the chase missions play more like an obstacle course than an actual fight. That being said, the second episode of the DLC, Turf Wars, ends with Spider-Man going up against Hammerhead.
You like? Project Olympus in action. Finished it up while you were playing with the dolls.
So that's what they're wearing in Paris this season.
A mob boss with a skull made of reinforced steel. Hammerhead's crew is among those taking part in the resulting gang war for the power over New York's criminal underworld, with the powerhouse crime bosses like Kingpin and Mr. Negative out of the picture. In-game, Hammerhead won't just be equipped with his metal cranium to dish out major headaches, but will also be wearing the Project Olympus suit, an experimental battle armor manufactured by Sable International, allowing him increased strength, speed, and laser wrist cannons. Although the suit is highly vulnerable to electric webbing, so embrace your inner static and put a shock to his system. Also, Hammerhead is assisted by his Magi enforcers because strength in numbers, I guess. After subduing Hammerhead and before the police can take him into custody, Captain Watanabe arrives on the scene.
Yuri. What are you... No, Yuri! Don't do this!
Driven to her breaking point by Hammerhead's rampage around the city, she seemingly kills Hammerhead out of revenge by shooting him in the head that Spider-Man tried to stop. However, in the post-credit scene, it is revealed that Hammerhead is alive thanks to one of his men sabotaging the ambulance transport and revives him with a taser.
Boss.
Which leads us directly into the last episode of the DLC, Silver Lining, where Spider-Man discovers that not only is Hammerhead still alive and hiding, he is also looking for more Sable International tech to arm his mafia. While dealing with several armed Magi enforcers, Spider-Man soon gets into an untimely confrontation with Silver Sable.
Tell me everything you know.
Yeah, I talk a lot better without a gun in my face.
You have 3 seconds.
Just put the guns down.
1,
We really gonna do this? 2, 6, 9, 11, 7...
An international mercenary, she and her team, Sable International, were hired by Mayor Norman Osborn to bring order to the city during the events of the main storyline. Spider-Man describes her as possibly the best quote-unquote pure fighter he's ever seen, seeing that she's highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, able to go toe-to-toe with the webhead without superhuman enhancements, but will often use various equipment to aid her in battle like her signature twin handguns and energy shields she projects from her wrists. That being said, watch out for her hip toss though. That counter does some major damage. Eventually, Spidey and Sable find common ground with one another and team up to take on the cybernetically enhanced Hammerhead.
You two teaming up now? Cute. But it ain't gonna do no good.
The final showdown with the Silvermane wannabe takes place on the Saber International boat. There, Spidey and Sable work together to break through Hammerhead's carbon steel armor by luring him into a laser strapped to Sable's jet.
Almost. Sable, what's your status?
Laser is back online.
You're just pissing me off!
However, this is no easy task, seeing that Hammerhead 2.0 is equipped with more powerful weapons and armor, making him stronger and faster than before, and is once again assisted by his Magi enforcers armed with Sable tech, adding to the frustration of trying to nail Hammerhead down. The fight ends with Sable crashing her jet into Hammerhead, shutting his circuits down for good.
KO!
With the city safe from another major threat. For now. By my count, there were a total of 14 bosses in Marvel's Spider-Man, 9 bosses for the main campaign, 2 bosses for the side missions, and 3 bosses for the City That Never Sleeps expansion. Every boss was defeated on Ultimate Difficulty, which is the hardest mode in the game. However, even on Ultimate Difficulty, I'd still argue that the game wasn't as challenging as it could have been. Nevertheless, Spider-Man's compulsive and flashing gameplay never lost its momentum for me. There was a significant amount of Marvel villains, both iconic and lesser known from the Spider-Man mythos, to go up against, which kept the encounters fresh and interesting. Looking at you, Avengers. Which in turn makes me excited to see what the villain lineup will end up being in the inevitable sequel. So, when it comes to the game's placement on the boss tier scale, I'm placing Marvel's Spider-Man in the A tier. When looking at our boss token awards, the Soulsborne award for the hardest boss fight goes to Cyborg Hammerhead. Now this choice may be a bit of a shock for some of you, but I have to be honest. When playing through the entire game on Ultimate Difficulty, I found Cyborg Hammerhead to be the most difficult to deal with due to his constant barrage of lasers and bombs, all the while fighting off his Sable Tech armed henchmen, which took several attempts to turn Chrome Dome into scrap metal. The Great Mighty Pooh award for the worst boss fight goes to Taskmaster. Honestly, both Taskmaster encounters came off fairly flat. Sure, he pulled off some nifty moves here and there, but I was hoping for something more, especially after completing 16 of his tedious challenges. The Taskmaster from Avengers beats this boss battle by a mile. The Bowser Jr. award for the easiest boss fight goes to Scorpion. Now at first glance, fighting multiple Scorpions looked intimidating, but once you realize it only takes a few hits for them to go poof, the fight quickly became a walk in the park. Cool backdrop though. The Golden Pickaxe award for the most creative boss fight goes to the second encounter with Mr. Negative. I'll admit, the Susanoo that Mr. Negative conjures up in the third fight was pretty badass, but the fight with Mr. Negative in the train cars was one of the moments that made me fall in love with this game. Due to the fight feeling the most cinematic out of all the boss fights, with the camera pushed closer towards the action, amplifying the tension of the encounter even further. The Ultimate Showdown award for the best boss fight goes to Doc Ock. The setup for the fight from beginning to end was perfection in my eyes, striking the right balance of narrative purpose, creative combat scenarios, and cinematic flair that will probably go down as one of my favorite final bosses of all time. Plus, seeing that anti-Ock suit in action is just so badass. And there you have it, that's the boss recap from Marvel's Spider-Man. Let me know how you rate the bosses in the comment section down below, and what game would you like to see me cover next. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, it really helps me out. Subscribe for more content from me on the boss recap. I'm DMLX, and I'll see you in the future.